My name is Eric Schaup. I'm the CEO of PeerSpace. PeerSpace is a peer-to-peer marketplace for meetings and events. So the idea is that we help real estate owners and operators to put their space on the platform to be booked by the hour for meetings or events. And so it's apropos that we're actually using an unused floor of this building for a conference. That's not something you would normally think of. But that is exactly what we do every day on PeerSpace. So 5 years ago, PeerSpace was founded based on a simple truth. Most event spaces are terrible. We've all been there. We've all been in that conference room at a hotel, terrible carpet, bad food, no windows, and not to mention how hard it was to book it and how expensive it was. When in reality, there are literally so many alternatives all around us. If you look out these windows, you can see all the possible alternatives. Over the course of the last 5 years, PeerSpace has added over 20 different categories of space, everything from lofts to museums to art galleries to bars and restaurants. And there's really one thing that ties them all together, is that in all cases, these owner-operators are seeking a new revenue stream from real estate that is either unleased or simply underutilized, either not being used at night or on the weekend or during the day, and they're looking for a way to monetize the space. For the guest side, for those seeking a meeting or an event, these are fundamentally better spaces, often better suited to their actual need versus a hotel conference room. They're typically cheaper, and they're actually easier to book. So on the guest side, like who's booking these meetings and events? We see three general categories. Number one is meetings. So these are the 8 to 10 people. It could be an executive planning session. It could be a product brainstorm. It could be a training. It could be a conference like this one. Second is media production. This is a massive category. There's a lot of money going into media production today, and what we see is everybody from the CBS News to the next Instagram star to a product catalog work being done by CPG, all the way down to wedding photos. All of that's happening, and it's a very large category. And lastly is celebrations. This could be a launch event, or it could be a corporate happy hour, or even a holiday party. So there is a lot of need out in the world seeking these spaces. And in fact, by our research, in the US alone, every year, over $100 billion is being spent on meetings and events for venue rental. So those dollars are going to go somewhere. And the question is, where should they go? Particularly when you have a need that's going unmet by the traditional options. So over the course of our 5 years, we've worked with small companies, medium companies, large companies. In fact, the majority of the Fortune 500 have used us for booking their meetings and events. Here are some of the notable names. They're across industry, but special emphasis on tech, media, finance, and CPG. So a few stats. So we draw our trends and our information today from kind of a long history. So we now have over 14,000 spaces across the US and growing. We can look at trends across our 130,000 bookings that we've done over time. We've now had 3 million attendees go through these events who we've talked to over time. And then consistently we have high marks from our customers for this combination of alternative spaces, ease of booking, and cost effectiveness. And lastly, we draw the trends from across the US. We've touched down officially in 14 markets across the US, and our customers are drawing us into a number of more, and we seek to fill in the map over time. Let's switch to the main event, which is the case study about multifamily. In this case study, we're going to talk about one of our partners who has made over $1 million in a little bit over a year's time. This partner is a public company. It's a multifamily REIT company. They came to us and they said, we have these amazing condo complexes across the country, and we've built these amazing amenity spaces. They could be rooftops, they could be conference rooms, it could be lounges, and they're largely unused. It's an amazing perk for our residents, but they're simply not being used. And so is there some alternative way for us to use them for the benefit of the space and for us to make a little bit extra money? So their goals, as we talked to them, was, number one, was driving additional revenue. Number two, which I think was very interesting, there's a strategic goal on their part to get new potential customers into their space who might ultimately become residents. So they're not even paying to acquire these customers. These customers are paying to be acquired. And the third is they needed to be simple. because this was not their core business, and this is something they're going to have to roll out to all of their locations, and so it needed to be simple to run. So a few learnings over the course of the year and a half plus that we've been in a relationship with them. I'll just give you a few of the learnings that we've collectively learned in our partnership. Number one is the importance of a pilot. Anybody who's worked at a large company, as many of you do currently, it's hard to get a new business going. You kind of need to prove the case before you're going to get real support. And so it's important to start small. Start with a pilot on a couple properties, get them going, demonstrate there's a real revenue opportunity, and that the logistics of actually gaining that revenue isn't going to overtake the company. Number two, it was very important to this partner that they have insights, not only into how the entire portfolio was performing in terms of the business it was generating, but wanted to be able to look at each individual property and could compare and contrast which ones are closing the deal, which ones are losing out on business as a way to improve the overall portfolio's performance over time. Number three, good income. So REITs have requirements about what kind of income they can actually make legally. And so if you think about an event, for example, they would consider the revenue coming from the event itself, the venue rental part, to be good income. That's like within bounds. But if there was income around food or drink or something else that might be a natural part of an event, that would be considered bad income, and it was not possible for them to take on as a business. So those aspects of the event had to be managed elsewhere. Number three, local alignment. They have 100+ properties to try to get the entire portfolio to sign up to this. They need to get local alignment, and they need to get individuals trained to be able to provide the level of service that they wanted to offer. And lastly, control. While our tools give them all the control they want in terms of what events they choose, that was for them to determine which events they were going to choose and which they weren't, based on the kind of events they felt were appropriate for their space. So what are some results? So over the course of our relationship, they've now made about $1.2 million in revenue, and that's continuing. Across their properties, at their best, most successful properties, what we've seen is increases of $100 to $300 of revenue increase per unit equivalent for their top properties, which is substantial for these businesses. And I think maybe the most important part is that this is effectively 100% margin business. So the revenue goes straight to the bottom line for them. It can be much more impactful than you might think based on that kind of revenue number. Just to give you a couple examples of the events that we've been running in these spaces. Top left there, CNBC did a filming of an interview for TV. Visa had a holiday retreat. Facebook had a brainstorm session, and Accenture had a leadership meeting. All great examples of the types of people they would love to have be residents at their properties. So as our relationship with this partner has increased, more properties have come online from that partner, but the word has also gotten out. And so we now have relationships with many of the top 20 multifamily REIT companies in the US, and they're bringing their properties online for the same reason. They're trying to monetize their amenity spaces within their multifamily communities. And so that has resulted in a 7x space growth over 2 years. But that opportunity in multifamily is a proxy for the opportunities across all asset classes. So we've talked about an aspect of residential, but the same opportunity exists for meetings and events across commercial, industrial, and retail. And I just want to give you guys a couple anecdotes to illustrate the point. So here's a property. It's actually a WeWork property here in San Francisco that used for co-working. But on nights and weekends, it was not being utilized. Once people went home to go home after work, it emptied out. And so they put their property, along with other WeWork properties, on the platform. And as an example, we were able to do an AT&T hackathon after hours, so they could monetize the space. This space has been booked by other people like Uber and Clorox and Gap as well. Exactly the types of people that, again, WeWork would love to have coming through their properties to become prospective members. Another commercial example, this is an historical building. This is a space that was essentially being unused, maybe not unlike this floor. And it was put on the platform, and it was turned into a meeting and training facility. And it's been used by a number of people, including Blue Bottle, Roche, Netflix, and Accenture. Blue Bottle held, I think it was their executive team meeting there very recently. Switching to industrial, So if you look at the space on the left side, you wouldn't naturally say, this is a space for meetings and events. But alas, it was actually been used by people like the Clippers, Toyota, Sony, and ESPN. And the anecdote I'll share here is that the Clippers wanted to do a photo shoot with their cheer squad. And this provided the perfect backdrop for them in doing that photo shoot. So one of I think the misconceptions as we talk to owner-operators is that they don't want to try the platform because they just think their space isn't right for this. And I think what we found over time is that you actually don't know. You'd be surprised how people want to make use of your space for alternative uses. Another industrial example is this warehouse that's been booked by Paramount, Lululemon, Activision, and I think it's Free People? Yeah, Free People, who is a women's clothing line. They've used this space multiple times for doing photo shoots for their seasonal collections. And then finally, on the retail side, I think when we think about reusing retail space, we immediately think of retail pop-ups. And I want to say there's a lot more than just pop-ups that can be done with unused retail space. So in this example, this partner of ours chose to use this unused storefront space as a meeting and event space. So during the day, it's full of meetings and conferences, and at night, it's used for networking events and for celebrations. So it's just a great way for them to use this storefront property that wouldn't otherwise be used. It's been booked by people like Columbia College, Sweetgreen, DoorDash, and Lyft. And lastly, another storefront space that was being unused had multiple uses applied to it. So they've done everything from a pop-up art gallery to leadership meetings and networking events. People who booked it are people like Dell and CBS, Ralph Lauren, and Kaiser. Talk to you about how Multifamily, this one company, has made over $1 million on PeerSpace. And that opportunity exists in all asset classes. And so I guess the question that I want to pose to you guys, the challenge I want to offer for those of you who are owner-operators of real estate or that you advise and work with those who are, the question is, are you really using the space to your full potential? And have you really considered all the options for monetizing the space? Because people don't necessarily think of meetings and events first, but there's a huge market out there, and I would suggest you consider it. With that, I'll say thank you, and we'll be here if you guys have questions.